Okay, hello AP US history students. So what I want to take you through in this video is the issue of stagflation in the 1970s. And this is really important because we're going to see a shift in the 1970s now away from Keynesianism. And remember that the Keynesian economic system was considered to be in the 1950s, in the 1960s, really successful. So why did it collapse? Okay, in order to talk about this, I'm going to start off really quick in the 1970s with stagflation. So what is stagflation? So traditionally in economics, there were two big problems that took place, either inflation or deflation. So what is that? Inflation, as you can see in here, is meaning that there's too much money in the economy and so prices are going up. Deflation means there's not enough money in the economy, so consumer demand is down. Now you probably notice up here it says there's not enough employment. And the reason why there's not enough employment at the time is that we don't see a lot of people buying things. That's probably because they don't have a lot of money. They don't have enough jobs. So what's the solution that we would have? Well, traditionally, Keynesianism had really simple solutions. Either you go ahead in the case of inflation, you take money out of the economy. If the problem is deflation, you put money into the economy. Now, who does that? Well, it could be the Federal Reserve. They can take money in and out of the economy. It could be Congress through spending. So you have a variety of different ways that you can do something like this in what we call fiscal policy or monetary policy. Monetary with the Federal Reserve, fiscal policy with the Congress. So that was the idea. That's the way traditionally you solve the problems. Riddle me this. What happens when both problems happen at the exact same time? Now, traditionally, that's not possible for both of these problems to happen at the same time. If we have too little money in the economy, that means we have deflation. So there's no way you're going to have inflation, right? If we have too much money in the economy, you're going to have inflation. There's no way we could have deflation at that time. That doesn't make any sense. And yet in the 1970s, inflation and deflation both go up at the same time. How is that possible? Well, there are a few different explanations as to why that might be the case. So as you can see, I need to get myself a little bit closer here so you guys can see what's going on here. So one possible idea goes to somebody named Milton Friedman. Milton Friedman was a conservative economist during the 1950s and 1960s. And Milton Friedman said the following thing. He said, the reason why we're seeing stagflation at this time is, in his opinion, due to unrealistic expectations. So what do I mean by that? What I mean is this. Milton Friedman saw that during the 1950s, 1960s, and into the 1970s, unions had been protected, and unions demanded that workers' wages go up. That's their job. That's what they're supposed to do. So the unions are demanding higher wages. Businesses then have that extra cost. So why are they going to give in to unions so easily? Because under Keynesianism, they believe the government will come in and the government's going to solve the problem. If things get bad, the government will put money in the economy or take money out of the economy. So businesses think, okay, we can raise wages for unions. That makes sense because the government will solve the problem. But what ends up happening is, in the long run, the government is not able to solve the problem. So businesses start to raise their prices because there's more money in the economy, while at the same time taking people out of the economy, basically laying people off of their jobs in order to cut for their costs. Now, why are they doing this at this time? Well, Milton Friedman claimed it's because at the time, government was providing more and more funding for people who were poor, more and more types of job opportunities. And so because of that, basically you could have businesses laying people off and you could have prices going up at the same time because government was providing consumer demand, consumer power off of that. So that's Milton Friedman's explanation. Why should you care about that? Why should you be looking at Milton Friedman? Because keep in mind that Keynesianism has been basically the dominant economic philosophy from 1945 up until 1970. Milton Friedman is trying to argue against that. And remember, in 1970, actually the president at the time was President Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon was considered to be a conservative. He claimed, we are all Keynesians now, whether you're conservative or if you're liberal. So when Milton Friedman came along as a conservative, he was saying, I don't think we're all Keynesians now. I'm going to provide you with an alternative thesis as to why we're running into these problems. This is why the government needs to get out of the way. And that's why we start to go now towards a Friedrich Hayek notion of let's go back to markets and just let markets take care of themselves. So that's Milton Friedman's explanation. Okay, is there any alternative explanation to this? Well, come on over here and we're going to take a look at it. So the alternative explanation that we can probably do, we can get here, it's OPEC. So what was going on with OPEC? OPEC is known as the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. And OPEC was out in the Middle East. It included all the Middle Eastern countries, and it included Venezuela. Why? Because Venezuela has a lot of oil. Why were they coming together? Really over politics. The Middle Eastern countries were trying to put pressure on the United States over policies dealing with Israel and the Middle East. So what OPEC did was it began to cut supplies on oil. There was a high energy demand at this point. There weren't that many alternative energies to really compete with, and that creates price shocks around the world, both in 1973 and in 1979. Now, you might be thinking, yeah, whatever, so what? So we have some price shocks. Why does that matter? Think about how many things oil impacts around the world. Just give you one quick example. Did you know that oil is actually in our rugs? Yeah, believe it or not. There is petroleum in our rugs in order to keep them stainless. Now, I know you're probably like, who cares? It's just rugs, Mr. Zucker. That's not important. But the important part is oil is not just being used for fuel. It's being used in so many parts of our economy. If you end up constricting the supply, you're going to end up jacking up prices all around the economy. So maybe part of the problem of stagflation had to do with international political policies as well. No matter what, in the end, stagflation is going to cause the collapse of the Keynesian economic system. We're going to start moving into a new type of way of doing economics when we hit the 1980s, although to be quite honest, it's not all that new. In many ways, it's the same policies that we saw before the Great Depression. Okay, see you guys in class.